What's up, crew? Welcome to Filming in Progress, the show that takes you backstage into the world of local businesses and the people who make them shine. Please join me in welcoming Eva, a former senior geologist turned her passion for creativity and science into the Chocolate Lab, an award-winning company that pushes the boundaries of modern chocolate artistry. Eva, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Aiden. Thanks for having me.
Where are we?
We're here at the Chocolate Lab in our flagship location here on Stephen Avenue.
Why the chocolate?
Why chocolate? All good stories start from a place of pain. My background is actually in engineering. I was laid off in 2015 on my return from mat leave, and my husband was already taking a chocolatiering course. And so as we were finishing up our contingency plan and how we were going to operate and manage 3 children in an economic downturn, we decided to go all in on ourselves.
And you said your husband was already starting a chocolatier.
Well, he was starting a course in chocolatiering. He got an internship with a certain Belgian chocolatier in town, and it didn't last very long before he quit and said that he wanted to start something on his own. So it was important for him to be able to have the creative control and the freedom to do something extraordinary. And 8 years later, with over 21 international chocolate awards, packaging design awards, Bean to Bar awards, we've arrived in a good kind of way. And we have a small but extraordinary team. No fancy investors, it's just the 2 of us and our team of folks.
Was it a passion of yours as well, or was it kind of your husband that spearheaded the idea of chocolate and then you were just all behind it?
I don't have any background in entrepreneurship, and my husband's more of the type that takes those types of risks. Because I grew up as an engineer and somewhat square in my upbringing, the reality is the risk for me was a lot of stress. So I didn't really have the capacity to believe in myself in the introductory times of the business. However, I believed in him. And I believed that together, we are just better together than we are just on our own. And so it was a risk that I was willing to take because it was a kind of ride or die moment. And there's no one that I could think of to better support than myself and my partner. And so that was kind of the beginning. It didn't start off as a huge passion at first. It was really just a series of experiments to see, if we could land, if we could show, could we make extraordinary product? Could we learn the skills? Can we learn skill sets and stack them? What would it take to get to 7 figures? Because at the time, I had no idea what the vision was. And over time, it took a lot of bravery, a lot of courage, and a lot of hard work to develop and hone in on what the vision was, to develop passions, and to ensure that we were in the right places for all of our skill sets with the staff that we have.
Did you know that you had complementary skill sets like when you started out, or was that something that was learned along the way?
Oh, it was a complete surprise. When you have a butter knife, you don't realize not only is it a butter knife, you can cut with it, you can spread with it, you can use it as a screwdriver. It's probably not the best tool and it probably shouldn't be your only tool, but if you're using it, then fantastic. What I learned is that all of my background in data analysis, all of my background in forecast projections, finances, being able to, just do a budget. Although I didn't do them at a small business level, I was able to do them at a high level in a corporate realm with large budgets. The thing is, when you're working in a multi-billion-dollar international conglomerate versus your own gig, the pressure's different. You're playing with someone else's money, and then this time it's all of my savings. What am I going to do? How are we going to do it? I can't afford to lose. What does this look like? What does it mean? How hard am I going to work? How thin am I going to spread myself? So that level of personal awareness and understanding was a huge learning curve.
Did those pressures come with a newfound kind of drive to ensure that it works? Using your own savings, not having failing not being an option?
Well, I think there's a real sense of beauty in ignorance, right? What you don't know, you're willing to try. There are many places where I found I spun and wasted a lot of time. However, if I look at my, say, 20-year-old self versus my 40-year-old self, just from a decade perspective, there's certain things you're just not willing to do when you have a family that you were willing to do when you were young on your own. And I found myself in those positions where it's like, oh, the risk seems high, this feels very uncomfortable. But the definition of courage and bravery is just having all those feelings and going for it anyway, knowing that you're going to learn and make an adjustment along the way. So it was just small steps of me. Initially, it felt like a roller coaster ride that I just sitting there white knuckling and being bitter about. And after a while, I just made the executive decision for myself, like, I have the choice to be miserable or actually enjoy the wind on my face and call it a ride, as opposed to this is the worst experience of my life. And now, through 8 years, through the repetitions, through many cycles in business, those discomforts don't feel quite as uncomfortable, but the stresses are different as your company grows. And so that's kind of that's the place I'm in now. Back in the day, I don't think I'm emotionally regulated well. And I found the stress very difficult to manage, on top of having a young family, on top of having that identity shift in transitioning careers. So it became very important for me to take care of myself, a level of self-care. And then came the self-awareness piece so that I could actually reinforce the discipline and consistency that comes with entrepreneurship in order to take care of yourself and then show up for others and those that you lead.
These tactics that you use to manage stress and the pressures and those sort of things, how did you go about learning them?
I think it was the very beginning of 2015. It was summer, and I remember just going into podcast land. And this was the very beginning of like YouTube and all those types of things that were just kind of cranking out. And this was before COVID. I started following, certain influencers and people who I deem as professionals that, reach at a very different level. A few of those people, they were doing interviews, and it was really about mindset. And along with the growth mindset was the understanding that I didn't have one at the time. I really believed I had one. I guess some people would call that the false growth mindset, where it's like, oh yeah, I do all those things. Not really. It wasn't through repetition at this point. It was actually hearing feedback from a podcast that forced me to reflect that I wasn't performing in the way that I said I would. There was a gap in how I showed up and who I wanted to become. And in order to close the gap, you have to develop those skills. And it's a very difficult conversation when you have a fixed mindset or you think you have a growth mindset, you're not quite there. My partner, Dallas, he already had a growth mindset, so he wasn't the person I was concerned about. I was really concerned about me and how I was showing up for him. And if you're an engineer, you're concerned with, how many ways can this fail? What are the factors of safety? How can we ensure that, all of our bets are going to be upside, right? We don't want to be in the land of downside. But it was during one interview that I realized that I wasn't showing up for him. I was just being kind of a jerk and pointing at all the problems, but not offering a solution, not helping to bail water, not helping to row the boat. And I was like, that's kind of a dick move, right? And so what adjustment am I going to make, and how am I going to show up for him so that we both succeed? And it's not just for he and I, but it's for our family and for the people in our charge. Because if we're not successful, then what's the point of having these employees? What's the point of trying to feed our children? Then all that effort is for naught. So when I started to make those adjustments and showing up and being accountable and responsible for the things that I promised myself that I would do, and then when the problems came, making those adjustments to ensure that it was handled, it was then that I started to see the results in revenue. And then we could focus on the experience that we wanted our clients to have. So that's kind of the way that I managed mindset, tricks, tactics, those types of things. But it's also for the fact that I asked for mentorship. And I think the most difficult thing for entrepreneurs is often you don't know how to ask for help. And in what capacity, you don't have the self-awareness. And usually people who are entrepreneurs have worked so hard on their own to try to manage whatever problems they have that by the time they ask for help, it's far too late. Or they just don't have the right vocabulary to actually ask for the very specific things that they need. And I was no exception to this. It took me years to actually dial in and how to ask a proper question in order to get the help that I needed, in order to develop the strategies to get the results I wanted. And it's still an ongoing process.
Asking the question, I think that's such a hard thing to do, right? And believe, well, I think there's a culture that exists right now that's really, you should be able to do it on your own, or why can't you do the thing? What kind of led you to ask the question in the first place and be comfortable, accepting help?
I think the most difficult part was the fact that there are so many things that I don't know, right? And when you're feeling vulnerable because you're like, I don't know the answer, in corporate, in history, to your parents, that's not culture that's actually indoctrinated us to say, I don't know. Scramble for the answer, go find one, find a solution, get it done. There's not a whole lot of grace in the fact that you don't know. You can find the answer. If you can learn from somebody else and ask the question, then why wouldn't you? You could avoid wasting time. You could avoid, a pitfall of some kind, whether it's financial or social. It's really important for you to experiment with those things, but often the question, it has to be intrinsically vulnerable, and it also has to be like humble, right? As opposed to, often people would come to us and say things like, well, what are your tips and tricks on how to get your social media account to rock? And I'm just like, get a good camera, post regularly. There's no real secret. It's about showing up and doing the work. If you think you're, in Gary Vaynerchuk's words, you think you're going to change the world by posting once a week? Like, no, you have to do the work, and there's a grind for everything. And in every aspect of every piece of your business, there's a certain level of grind. The question is, can you systematize it? Can you explain what it is? Can you communicate it effectively? And can you train somebody in order to do it? And can they train based on what you offered them with respect to information? And can that be scalable?
Systematization. It's one of the hardest things that we see in new and young entrepreneurs, or people that are trying to go from X to X and scale, right? What are some of the ways that you learned to systematize those different things in your business that help take you to the next level?
Well, I have a lot of engineer friends, and we all think critically, and we all think in a certain kind of way. So when you take something from first principles, you can have a conversation with someone in science and just say, okay, based on these variables, if I have these constants and these variables, what are the outputs if things change? Sometimes there's too many variables and it makes you feel really uncomfortable because you can't control the outcome. But in the same breath, if everything's a constant, then you're not actually trying and making the effort to do something different early enough to actually see the results of what adjustment you can make and then what the increased value of those results or the return on investment are. Being an engineer, it's really easy to come with systems because you develop them and then you break them. Like, what didn't work? Like, okay, well, I wrote that down. Well, clearly that wasn't the right answer. So, you're asking the people around you that actually do that function on a daily basis. So what was wrong with my document? Or what was wrong with the document? Well, this, and this. Can you make that edit for me? Like, it's an evolving document. And as the team grows and as equipment gets introduced or new products are there, or you're taking that particular system, but you're applying it somewhere else, like say it comes to staffing or processing, in retail versus, a different retail location. Some things are the same, but some things are very different. But the only way to find out is to test it and also give the autonomy to the people who are responsible and accountable to make those changes on your behalf, and you just check them over. And I'm finding that firm beliefs loosely held is really a good way to kind of approach problem solving.
What do you mean by that, firm beliefs loosely held?
Everyone has their context, perspective, and experiences that shape their beliefs, their opinions, their outcomes. Just because I believe something very differently than you do, and you can shine a light on like, hey, like this is how I see things, it might shift my entire paradigm on how I see a particular process or political landscape or ingredients or supply chain or whatever. And the thing is, if I'm open to a change, then I'm more apt to be more agile and flexible in a solution. And that for me is very important because that's how you stay ahead of everyone else, but it's also how you evolve. You cannot evolve and grow if you are exactly the same year after year. And I'm not interested in staying the same way.
How do you ensure that you're constantly kind of pushing the needle forward and doing different things, especially in a competitive industry where, maybe expanding beyond chocolate, but sweets and that sort of thing in general? What does your competitive landscape look like? And then how do you ensure that you're pushing the boundaries all the time?
Well, it's always reassuring when people are ripping you off and copying you, right? Like an example is our boxes. When a Chinese company offers you your exact box that you helped design for your own use, and they're trying to sell that to you, at first it's not that flattering. But after a while, you're like, oh, this forces me to evolve because now everyone has the opportunity to do what I've done or we've done or the company has done. The reality is that if you are truly creative, you're always working on this anyway, whether it's a branding design, whether it's flavors, whether it's combinations, whether it's drinks, whether it's confections, whether it's baked goods, who your clients are, what suite of clients you have, what vertical you're going to approach next. And not all of them work, and not all of them work simultaneously. And so being really staunchly firm on those things doesn't work to my advantage. I can't imagine it working to other people's advantage, but I'm not in the business of ensuring competitive advantage. I just want to create an extraordinary company that makes extraordinary things with an extraordinary team, and we're happy. We love coming to work. We go to bed tired, and we start all over again the next day. The concept of waking up and just being miserable and having to go to work to grind out 8 hours is devastating. So trying to keep it fun and upbeat and light and pleasant is enough of a challenge to keep things evolving, different, et cetera, because you can feel the stagnation in a team. You can feel the stagnation in product development. And but in the same breath, when you're a scaling, growing company, there are so many people who haven't met you. And everything that is old to you is new to them. So being understanding of that and just meeting people exactly where they are is really important in service.
If anybody were to look at your packaging, they'd know that obviously visual identity, branding, that sort of thing is very important to you. And as you alluded to, it's been critical. Was that identity was looking different always important to you, or did that come throughout the years of building?
It came through the years of building. The reality is that we have extraordinary people who have extraordinary skills that know us and care about us. And so we have people in our arsenal that do contracting for us and help us with our brand, help us with our design. And, for them, it's fun because they're used to dealing with, Fortune 500 companies who have, marketing and branding requirements. It's very different when you're like, okay, laissez-faire, like let's take all the boundaries away. Like, can we do something really that'll just kind of make me uncomfortable? Dallas has less issues with branding and a level of discomfort. I'm more of a creature comfort person where it's like, oh, but this worked before, I don't want to let go. And they're like, let's hot frogger. And that concept of like, let's change everything around Eva so that, oh, now that we're behind here, we have to change this particular thing. It was what they wanted in the first place, but I was resistant to, so they have to let me pretend it's my idea. So, sometimes you just have to take the time to make the switch. Sometimes you can get, everyone around you to rally around you to make the switch. I'm a little slower on the uptake, but they know how to handle me.
You've used the word discomfort several times, and I really love that. And I think, we've learned through this podcast and other means that leading into that discomfort is where the magic happens, is where the growth happens, those sort of things. You mentioned that you err on the side of not doing that as much in the past. What is it that kind of pushed you to feel comfort in discomfort?
I think learning that discomfort is just a biological experience, right? When you understand what happens to you biologically, chemically, then you can manage it because you can feel it and you can kind of rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 and just say, yeah, I'm at a 9 right now, and I'm not the best version of myself. And I'm going to check out for a minute so that I can focus on something that is grounding, so that I can come back and make better decisions and lead differently. Or it's crunch time. It's very far from Christmas. That's our, busiest time. Cash flow isn't as, as great as I would like it to be. But I've been through 8 seasons of this, so I should be actually pretty comfortable with the level of discomfort. But with the scale that we're at, it's highly discomforting because, all of a sudden you need more ingredients, more packaging, more staff. And those are all the things that cost a lot of money. But the reality is that, every time I've been so uncomfortable, I've actually had to develop a series of practices to pull myself out of, imposter syndrome or not being kind or offering myself a level of grace. And that has taken years to kind of be my own best friend, to cheer myself on, where before I would need a group of people to rally around me to make sure that I didn't fall apart. And now I don't need that anymore. It's more like I've had a garbage day. I need my friends. Remind me why you're here for me, and snap me out of this. Kick me in the ass and send me on my way so that I can continue in the direction that I need to be in. But as you know, as an entrepreneur, on the other side of all the discomfort is where the greatest growth is. And if you just get through this one, then all the rest comes. And then you've survived another moment. So there's nothing new about that. It's just the fact that you just got to prove it to yourself again and again.
Consistency, yeah. Tell me about imposter syndrome and maybe how it's affected you.
I mean, my background is, I come from an immigrant background, and I grew up in a society where a lot of people looked like me. And so you're told at a very young age, if you achieve all of these things, then when you get to the door of whatever it is, it'll open for you. What they didn't tell me is, we'll open the door for you if we feel like it. Once you cross all the T's and dot all the I's, sometimes it's just not enough to achieve. And that was the dialogue that was going on in my head, that I was never going to be enough. The door is never going to open for me. And when you really believe that, it's not going to. I think in this chapter, in this season of my life, it was really understanding that, oh, wow, I'm incredibly hard on myself. I am not kind to myself. I'm the one who self-sabotages, and it doesn't feel good. And it wasn't until someone pointed out, your narrative is kind of messed. Yeah, you're not wrong. Then it was about journaling and really understanding, what am I saying to myself and not saying out loud to anyone else? And how am I dealing with that? And it became very important that I make those changes and adjustments so that not only was I better as an entrepreneur, but I was better as a parent, that I was better as a partner, that I was a better friend. And then if I could bring all of those skill sets to work, then I could actually champion things on a human level using EQ rather than just muscling everything with IQ and systems. Because when you're leading, it's so important that people, A, remember that you're a human being, but B, that you're not some robot that doesn't have feelings and just, automated rules and binary processes. Because there are so many shades of gray in business as well as with people.
What do people that are experiencing that, or the early stages of what you described, need to hear?
That it's normal. That everyone feels terrible about themselves on occasion. But you have to develop the practices in order to ensure that your narrative is on point. And it's not until you fix that you get extraordinary results on the other side. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are tons of entrepreneurial friends that I have that don't work on mindset. However, their personal relationships are falling apart, or because it's not a priority, they struggle in the areas of dealing with people. They are extraordinary at the things that they focus on, but sometimes that lack of self-awareness is a deep disadvantage to them, and then it affects their business, whether they're willing to admit it or not.
You mentioned that you work with your husband. Partnerships in general are complicated and difficult and require a lot of communication and those sort of things. And doing it with a partner can be even more complicated, or maybe require more input. How has your experience been? And yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, in the very beginning was very difficult. My partner, my husband, the father of my children, he is an extraordinary human being. He is creative and he executes at a very, very high level. However, it's very difficult from a corporate standpoint to kind of put boundaries around these types of folks. He had never at the time, led a meeting, had an agenda, had a performance review, like those types of things that, are for me second nature. But in the same breath, trying to apply those things to someone who doesn't really subscribe to those types of, foundations and structures in a corporate setting, it became the clash of titans where, this is the way it's supposed to be. And he's like, well, I've never experienced that. What are you trying to say? So it was really about, in the beginning, about me understanding how to work with a partner and not using my understanding of the world and applying it to him. It was trying to meet in the middle and compromise and understand what his needs were, how I could express my needs, and then both of us having our needs met in order to thrive. Early on, I think it was very difficult. We argued a lot. I joke around with my mentors about, wanting to fire him 3 times a day. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that my mindset was so rigid about how I thought things should be. Over time, what I've learned is if anyone should get grace and kindness and a break, it's my partner in life, so that we can ensure that the kids are taken care of, that our relationship is strong. And then everything with the business kind of comes in, smoother, just for the fact that we're not fighting against each other. We're fighting together against whatever problem we're facing. And so that has made us communicate more effectively. I know for a fact that sometimes things get bristly and we're sniping at each other, sniping at each other, or being unkind. It's those days that I cut out of work early so that I meet him at the house and we're making a meal together. That way we can be interrupted 1,000 times by our children, and it's nothing new, but we can actually get some things out of the way and understand where each other is coming from. And then the kids actually get to see us resolve problems and come to solutions and apologize to each other if we weren't the best versions of ourselves, but they get to see it wrap up. And so what's important to me, not only is my relationship with my husband, how I resolve conflict, but it's also demonstrating to my children that it can be done. And these are the examples that I want them to see, because my parents argued behind closed doors. We always knew that there was something up. I think all kids do. But when you're transparent about the problems that you have or the frustrations you have in your business or whatever it is, but you're working it out, they see things escalate, de-escalate, and resolve. I think that's so important for children to see, that it just doesn't end in yelling behind closed doors and then pretending nothing happened.
That segregation that you have from, turning off from business and going home and cooking a meal together, is that something that you had to work on, or did it come naturally?
Early on, before kids, Dallas and I both had international careers that involved a lot of travel. Most of my work was geological and earth science based. His was all in broadcasting, curling, and statistics. And so we had this no rock rule. We would not discuss curling. We would not discuss geology at home. We have other friends for those types of things. And it became a fast and hard rule. It's not that we don't discuss work at home, and it's not that we don't discuss work or home at work. It's just that we try to keep those places separate so that we're in the right frame of mind to answer those questions. Because when I'm relaxed at home and dealing with family things, I don't want to talk about, hey, there's a problem here, here, or here, and I have to switch out because I'm already engaged with my kids and they're the priority. So what it is really about having rules of engagement, knowing how to fight, knowing how to argue, and also knowing how to apologize. And being okay with your partner saying, now is not the right time for me. And not continually dipping in to trying to back them into a corner to get results or an answer. it's really about how you frame it. It's really about tone. It's about kindness and understanding, ensuring that they feel comfortable enough so you can get the answer that you need. But if you don't time it properly, frame it properly, use the proper tone, and you're in the wrong environment, you're never going to get what you want.
You said in there apologizing, and I think that's one of the hardest things that people have to do. People are very aware of when they make a mistake and what they've done, but not so comfortable apologizing. Do you find the same?
I come from a background where people don't apologize. So, I think I can count on my hand the number of times my parents have apologized, and it's happened in my 40s. The truth is that because I have children, I have to set an example. So in our household, an apology has 3 parts: the I'm sorry, what for, and what adjustment I'm going to make to do better. In unison, when one of my kids is apologizing to the other, it's like, I'm sorry. And then you can hear a chorus in the background. For what? And it just forces everyone to ensure, if you're actually offering an apology, you have to have all 3 parts in there. And so what better way to set the example for them to apologize to each other than for our mom and dad to apologize to each other? Or apologize to the kids when you're not the best version of yourself, or you made a rash comment, or you didn't allow them to do something, but you didn't have the full picture. I'm certainly not perfect, and I don't pretend that I am, but I'm certainly not going to pretend to my children that I'm perfect.
Love that trademark. Awesome. I'm going to go back a little bit because the framework that you have for business and the mindset that you've adopted, going through this work and starting your business and scaling it is incredible. Were there any early indications of entrepreneurship in your life? Anything early days when you were a kid that you were learning those skill sets at a young age?
Well, in watching my parents, both of them owned their own businesses at one point or another. However, it was highly and heavily discouraged for us to go into entrepreneurship. Growing up in the 80s, you're a real loser if you had to go make your own job. Corporate was the way to go. It was secure, it was safe. Get a job with the government, pension. These are the types of comments and rhetoric that I would hear growing up, and as well as from my parents, because at the end of the day, your parents just don't want to worry about you. So I was highly discouraged to have any adventures in entrepreneurship. Going into entrepreneurship was very painful because, I'm actually breaking mindsets that I've had that were embedded from a very early age, and trying to deal with the guilt of, I'm going against something that I've been indoctrinated to believe. And I'm actually okay with it, but I'm still struggling through the grief of understanding that I'm doing something for myself with a different framework, and it's okay to go for, because I believe that it's going to be okay. However, that part of you that's really young, the younger version of yourself that you have dialogue with sometimes, they're that's when it creeps in. It's you might not be enough. What if what they're saying about you is true? And the beauty of being older is the fact that after a while, you stop caring what other people think. And it was, for me, a much more difficult situation to deal with than it was for my husband. And it's been very interesting to watch his climb and his transition through the exact same journey, just because we're different people with different skill sets and different strengths. And but mine has not been easy, that's for sure.
How did you go about, you mentioned kind of what they're saying about you and that sort of thing. I imagine in a CPG business too, there's probably lots of reviews that you read online and those sort of things. How do those affect you, and how do you push past the things that, just how do you choose to not care about what's being said?
Well, if I go really far back, the reality is, scientists in general don't make bets on things that aren't tested. And when you throw around statistics, scientists are very apt to hang on to them. So when I went into entrepreneurship and told all my engineering geoscience friends, hey, I'm opening a chocolate shop, it was like Dawn dish detergent in a greasy pan, just everything just spread far, far away. No one wanted anything to do with me because they didn't want to associate themselves with failure. 4 or 5 years into the business, it turned into, hey, I went to high school with her. Yeah, we used to work together. I'm just like, well, this is really interesting, but it doesn't really tell me about me. It tells me everything about their behavior. And so when I apply that to, say, like a Google review or, those types of things, is the feedback truly about my company, the products we make, and the experience that they had? Or is it really about them, like the person who's reviewing, their beliefs, their expectations, and their privilege? Because at the end of the day, if you've never bought our product and you're giving me a review, or you're a disgruntled employee and you're leaving a garbage review to hurt my company, and those types of things happen. I'm not saying that happens regularly, but that happens to every employer. The truth of the matter is that you have to remember who you are at the day. And all these Google reviews, it's great when people put great reviews in. It's great when people put critical reviews in. But does it really describe who you are as a company, what products you make, and what services you provide if someone is just expecting you to bend over for them? And that usually keeps me in check, right? Are they giving me feedback that I can use to be better, or are they just complaining? Because at the end of the day, everyone complains. I'm not interested in hearing your complaints unless you have a solution I can provide for you to make you happier. Because anyone can complain. Not everyone can actually come up with a solution.
How do you segregate who's just projecting themselves, for lack of better terms, versus actually giving critical feedback that might be valuable?
Well, critical feedback is, I waited in line and it was too long. Or I brought home a product and it wasn't what I expected. This is what it looked like. This isn't the way it has been in the past. Or this person offered me a level of service, but it wasn't the service I had had previously. Those are comparisons, and usually like, hey, I can take that because you're a repeat customer. You're giving me feedback that I can actually improve on. Your product sucks. Your people suck. Yeah, it's okay. How can I be better from that? That just tells me about you. Go tell me what's better. Tell me how we can improve. So if there's no critical feedback, and I'm not interested in subscribing and offering somebody real estate in my head.
Going back to corporate, I think there's a lot of individuals who are considering or have recently left corporate, stable positions, if you will, to start something on their own, to found a business. I'm curious as to any synergies between. There's a lot of things that you don't learn in corporate that you will learn in entrepreneurship. But are there any ones that you find there are synergies? You learned something at corporate and it applied to the business that you now have.
Data. Like learning how to process data, learning how to manipulate data, how to spin it for reports, very, very advantageous. But in the same breath, you can learn anyone can use a spreadsheet, right? That's the truth. No one needs an extra spreadsheet, nobody. But in the same breath, it's kind of like, well, if you don't know how to master it and it terrifies you, you better figure out how to learn how to use it, read it, work it, because otherwise, you're relying on someone else. And if you are relying on that someone else, are they always going to be there? Is it scalable? Is it repeatable? If they get wiped off the face of the earth tomorrow, they win the lottery and they're gone. What have you got? Who are you going to turn to then? Having those contingency plans helps. And having that thought process is helpful, not from a fear-based kind of place, but from a contingency kind of place, right? Like, you have to have a contingency plan. If someone exits, you have to be able to fill that void or have people come together to develop the skill sets to manage that person who has left. So those are that. And it's tough because leadership is so different in corporate than it is in entrepreneurship. I didn't have the best mentors and best leaders in corporate. Like, I had good leaders, but nothing that ever prepared me for how to be an entrepreneur. And then when I found myself emulating the mentoring model that I had, it didn't work well for me in retail and in my own company, because they're not the same styles of people. They're not professionals that are paid XYZ amount of money. And then above and beyond that, the behaviors that exist in corporate oil and gas or in tech, they're just not the same as I have here. And so for me, the most difficult part of that transition was actually learning who I wanted to become, what type of teams I wanted to lead, how I wanted people to feel when they were around me, and ensuring that I was authentically myself as opposed to pretending to be someone that I absolutely was not.
You've mentioned mentors a couple times, and I love hearing about mentors and what role they've played. What role have they played in your founding, in your entrepreneurship journey? And how did you go about finding ones that actually, brought true value to you?
Yeah, well, it's really about community, and then having a handful or maybe two handfuls of people that you can call upon whenever you have a strategic problem, a marital problem, a conflict. My kids are driving me crazy. I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do next. I'm having a personal problem. I'm dealing with my mom or my family, or I'm spread too thin and I'm making mistakes, or I'm having imposter syndrome and I can't kick myself out of this. That's where they've come to light, and being able to ask them specific questions like, what are the tips, tricks, what are your practices that I can apply to my current practice as you know me? And what are my blind spots, right? Like, what am I not seeing? Like, this is how I see things. Is there a different way to frame this that I can be better at approaching a problem? And that has been incredibly helpful, especially after you've developed a relationship with someone over several years. Then they can see the patterns in your thinking and the terms that you use. You develop a lexicon and a vocabulary, and then they dig deeper into how you think, how you process, if you execute very quickly, if you actually listen or not. They can make those they can ascertain that for themselves. And then the reality is that if you show up and you make all those adjustments, you're like, this didn't work for these reasons, but I took this piece and it has really transformed my practice. Then it turns into like, okay, that's great that worked. What other habits, what other things can we stack on top of each other to make this work even better, to be more effective, to be more productive? And I think most people in the entrepreneurial space are trying to fit this much more work into a time frame that's this small, and how to have extraordinary focus and dedication to your craft, whatever that is. And as I'm developing as an entrepreneur and a leader and as a mother and as a partner, I don't find I'm getting worse. I find I'm getting better. And I start to like myself more, and I'm showing up differently, and I'm happier, and I'm full of joy, and I'm full of light. When I'm not full of light, I think people can feel that. When you thunder around and you just have energy that's just dark, people can sense that, and they instantly think that it's about them. And it's not. As an entrepreneur, you're just in your head a lot. And then sometimes you don't project positive, kind energy because you're working out a problem in your head. Having people offer to you that feedback is everything. That they're not afraid to tell you when you're a jerk. You're not the best version of yourself. They didn't like the way you spoke to them. It's so important to have that dialogue and to be open to it, because you can't improve without it.
How do you go about setting up a successful structure, maybe with a mentor? Is it regular meetings? Is it vulnerability? What does that look like?
For me, it's been a real long road, because in the beginning, like I said before, I didn't know how to ask a question. I just show up and brain dump on these poor people, and they'd be like, oh, that's nice. I just spent an hour of just you hurling all your problems at me. I'm not your therapist. That's not what we're here for. And then it turned into okay, this is the problem I have, and this is how I'm gonna solve it. Then they ask you just deeper questions, because in truth, the answer is within you. It's really about, for me, getting different perspectives, because other people in entrepreneurship, even though they're not quote unquote mentors, you're not sitting down with them with a regular meeting. The truth is that when you're stuck, if you're not reaching out to people, I don't think you're doing yourself a community service in the best kind of way. And when you're stuck and you're not making progress, you're stagnating, and that's, no one wants to hit any plateau in business. It never feels good to flatline. So having the people who kind of urge you to get past something, like, you can hang on to that, you can weaponize that and throw it at somebody repeatedly. How is it going to serve you? You have to move past it. So having the people who can talk you down, talk you through, and get you into the next stage of being unstuck is so important.
I read something on your website saying that you design experiences, and I love that idea. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, the reality is that we're a neurodiverse bunch of folks. We don't think in the box. We think really far outside the box. And when we're creating things for food, it's truly a sensory experience. So whether it's the experience that, of you eating something, or the experience of you receiving something, or the experience of you gifting something, we're all in because we understand what the steps are and when you're gifting something special to somebody. So when you're creating something that you want to be proud of, I would like to believe that if I'm going to get a box of chocolates for my mom and you were going to do the same for your mom, that I wouldn't have a different level of product than you would, right? And that when someone receives our product, they're like, this is for me, this is amazing. I don't even want to eat it, it's so beautiful. Having that being the opener to something that you gift is a beautiful thing, where someone has to take pause before they stuff it in their face. Before they take a bite and realize that not only is it delicious, it has crunch in it, or it's super smooth and creamy, or it's so visually appealing and it smells great, or yeah, I left these too long and they smell a little off, right? It's truly about the eating experience. However, most of our corporate clients, they want something special specifically for their clients. So that's usually customizations in boxes, inserts. Sometimes they're asking for specific, flavors and designs that are specific to them and their clients. And so we try to do those things for them. But at scale, it's tough to do something that's handmade.
Designing that experience, how does that come about? Is it just being like more aware of every different element that is part of the consumption process, other than just the taste, for example?
I don't think we just have a process. I think what happens is organically we had this is how we come up with a flavor. These are our recipes. These are generalities, the ratios. Then what happens is once you've mastered those, you can kind of flip things around. Like, these are different colors, or this is a different, we found some new sponges, or a different paintbrush, or a different, a head for the spray gun, whatever that is. And then based on what you have previously, when you introduce something new, you start to learn who has the touch to make the new thing sing. Then if you can use that, and then you're using it in different places, then it becomes part of your arsenal when you have tools to throw at a problem. So, okay, we need a new deco for a client and they want something specifically in gold and in black, and go, right? Then it turns into, okay, what is their vibe? Like, what does their business look like? What does their brand feel like? Are we going to go through iterations of this, or is just one and done? Those are the types of things that there's no real process in our creative systems. It's just really about enjoying the discovery of the result. And then if that works, then you document it. Or you make the adjustments to the previous thing that worked, but this is a little bit different. So no hard, fast rules, not yet.
Do you have a process for documentation of these learnings that you go about, when you're designing something new or creating a process or anything like that?
It's different on my side because mine's much more systems and operations and procedure kind of documentation. For the creative process, I think there's less of that because people just riff. The thing is, once you riff and it's in production, then you have to document it in a way so that it's repeatable, just like a recipe, right? But that when you get a recipe, they're not saying, okay, we live in Calgary, instead of 375, turn it to 410. They're not saying any of these things in the recipe. You have to cook it the first time, see what happens, bake it off. Oh, these are the adjustments that I need to make. it's kind of the same thing. Once you do it a few times and you've decided that this is part of your book, your playbook, then you have to make the adjustments in the playbook.
In creating anything incredible, it takes a team, right? I'm curious as to how you attract the right people that continue to push your business forward.
Well, Dallas and I sit on the board of the SATE Baking Arts and Pastry, or Pastry and Baking Arts, I guess is the department. The reality is that, cooking's a huge book. Pastry is a chapter in the book of cooking, and then chocolate is just a chapter in this entire book of pastry, but that's our whole book. It's tough because, and all artisan chocolatiers will tell you this, it's very difficult to get the skill level of a person who can do this at a high level, and many of them. So we often hire new grads and young folks just for the fact that you don't have to untrain. I think that comes in all verticals. Like, there are folks that have a pile of experience in all these different places, and they usually take their practices and bring them to their new job. And then they're like, well, why do you do it this way? Well, we did it this way at place A, but a different way in place D. And I'm just like, well, you're not at either of those places now, and that doesn't apply. Like, we need to purge this. There's work involved in breaking someone's skill sets and bringing them down to basics and then working them back up. So sometimes it's easier just to start from the get and just build their skills from zero. But this is, from what I understand in this particular vertical, this is something that is always going to be a struggle, is the churn.
Would you have any input to schooling or anything like that on that topic? Because you're absolutely right. You said it's not only your vertical. I'm curious, if you were to go and teach something about is it chocolatierism? How do you say that correctly?
Chocolatiering, yeah.
Chocolatiering. What would you go about differently to ensure that, you don't have to untrain somebody, but maybe they just come in with fresh eyes and can support you if the cat go?
I don't think that's something there's not something I can teach one or many people that would allow them to be the key that fits in every door. It's not like that. We just have keys that fit our doors. They have keys that fit other doors. The question is, can you take your keys and find a way to get them to work? Or is this going to be forever a problem, right? And sometimes you have people who are just willing to put aside everything and just learn and deal with what's in front of them. Other times you have people who can't manage that. And it's not until you actually get them in your work environment to see whether their skill sets work or not, or their behaviors, habits, the way that they operate works for your work culture. I find that usually about 100 days, people can usually keep it together past that probation period. We usually try to give contracts that extend a little longer, or closer to the 6-month mark, because more than anything, I'm really interested in how people resolve conflict. If you and I were working together and I did something in some kind of way that really upset you, I want to know what happened. And I would want you to be able to explain it to me in a way that'd be like, okay, not only do I not want to do it again, I'm going to learn something and apply it and make the adjustment. But not everyone is okay with having critical feedback. And if you can't have critical feedback as the driver for you to improve, we can't work together. So growth mindset is absolutely a qualification. And now that I'm skilled at recognizing my own lack of mindset, I've seen it in myself where I wasn't able to actually produce the outcomes that I wanted because of my mindset. Now I can see it in others, for sure. And it's tougher when it's not my department. That's all.
Do you find conflict resolution to be one of the key, things that might ruin a team or break a team apart? I mean, through both your corporate and what you do now, is there commonality between that?
I believe so. I mean, the reality is, if I'm able to communicate to you what, say we have a fight about a project, and you're like, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. And I'm butthurt about it. Even though it's been raised to management, even though it's been declared, this is the direction that we're going in, but I'm angry because my idea wasn't selected. There was a conflict. It has been resolved, but I can't move past it. These are choices and behaviors, right? And for me, that's not healthy, and it's really toxic, right? And then what ends up happening is I'll go to another employee and say, Aiden did this, this, and this, and his idea, my idea got sandbagged. And, there must be favoritism here, or I feel some kind of way. And they don't realize that when they're upset, they're just having a biological experience, right? Like, you have emotions. Are you regulating? Did you sleep well last night? Did you exercise? Like, are you eating enough protein? Are you hangry? Do you need a nap? Like, when I'm not the best version of myself, there's reasons for that. But if I'm hanging on to a comment and I can't put it aside, like that's going to stifle the growth and the work product of an entire team of folks. I can't have that. And so when I hear grumblings of it, I try to address it right away so that, we don't have those types of problems. But there's some personalities that are so difficult and so fixed that it's in our best interest to figure out an exit plan so that they can find the environment that works best for them and that there's no hard feelings, because like sometimes it's just not the right environment for them.
Are there ways that you've learned to identify that maybe at the beginning of the hiring process so that you kind of mitigate it, hopefully, to the best of your ability?
Well, we tried doing contracts in the beginning so that they can, before we bring you on board and we start paying employers remittance and benefits and all that fun stuff, why don't we have a period where we can determine, like, can you work under stress? Can you work with each other? And are you the right fit for the team? That has helped a bit. But in the same breath, I want to be the company that offers a level of consistency and, comfort, to offer the benefits, et cetera. So when we hire, we usually do like a video call. I'm not just a straight up phone person. I don't generally want to bring people into the factory unless they pass a vibe check. Are you someone I want to have a second conversation with? Are you fun? Are you full of light? Are you excited about life and everything around you? Because I don't want to bring somebody who's just like, Eeyore, and they're just, sad about everything and everything is a dark cloud and it follows them everywhere. I just find that that just doesn't help. But overall, when you have the feeling that a team is gelling and you want to maintain that, I'm finding that that is by far the most exciting time of team development. When you add someone new to the mix and things don't regress at all, but they just skyrocket, that becomes exciting.
I can tell sitting across from you today that you're passionate about your business and your growth and what you're building, and you should be. Where is it that you specifically get fulfillment out of what you do every day?
Well, I wake up every morning so excited to just perform, right? Can I turn this around? I was feeling some kind of way about something yesterday, and how is this going to go? But the reason why I do it every day is because I want to show my sons that we're capable and that, I have a growth mindset, and I'm not perfect. I'm not great at everything, but I'm not going to let that hold me back from trying. And these are the things that I'm good at. These are the things I'm not so great at. These are the things that your dad is extraordinary at. These are the things where I support him, right? These are the places where I'm vulnerable. This is where we're both vulnerable as a family, Being able to use my family as a litmus test for the decisions I make, and that I rest easy at night, and that when I wake up in the morning, I know that I've made decisions that my children wouldn't be like, they wouldn't be cringy, then I know I've done the right thing, So if I operate from a place of kindness and generosity, then I'm in a good mental health space and I'm treating everyone accordingly. When I'm I'm full of fear, I don't have the tendency to be as open, and I don't have the capacity to make really risky decisions. So I have to really temper my level of excitement to ensure that I'm coming at it from the right place and it's framed properly. And especially because I'm working with my partner and I'm working with my kids watching me, it's so important for also my team to understand that I'm doing this for, myself, the people in my charge, and for my family. And that's what lights me up.
Is there a world where your kids come and work for you at the factory?
Well, they already do. And then my eldest works downtown, a few times a month, and doing all the the pop-ups that we do across the city with other partnerships that we have. But I'm going to allow them to make the decision for themselves. I don't want to muscle them into, this is my legacy, take it. More than anything, I just want to ensure that I can prepare and create something for me and for us. And in the event that they want it, they can have it. And if they don't want it, that is fine. I'm going to be okay no matter what. And, if they choose to, I think I'd be really happy for them and really proud of them. If they chose not to, then, that's fine too. Like, I just look forward to just watching them grow and be great people.
You're not going to be disowned. They don't
know.
Awesome. What's next for you? What's next for you in the business?
We are seeing about a new space to increase our production capacity. We're seeing about new machinery that can be more effective in our use of time, just because labor is very expensive right now. And above and beyond that, we want to be able to pay people what they're worth, but we're not being able to turn around the amount of product that we need to. So, it's really about machinery where we can automate and where we're willing to sacrifice in automation. But there's a certain level of hand skills that I want to consistently nurture, for the fact that I don't want this to be a humanless, automated company. I think people are the backbone of what we do, and the skills that they bring and the level of service that we offer. So it's important to me that we're able to continue to do the art, to create the products, to do them in a loving way that is also just, heartfelt and extraordinary in that regard. I don't think you can have fully automated products in this vertical and still have extraordinary ingredients, still have extraordinary look, and minimize the manpower and have the same output. But those are based on my skills and my beliefs. Someone else could probably do it differently and be successful in a different capacity.
Where can we send people to follow along?
Yeah, well, you can follow us on Instagram. We also have, a Facebook page. Here on Stephen Avenue, we have our flagship store on the corner of First Street Southwest. And then we have our factory location in Highfield.
And do you do factory tours or anything like that? Or is that maybe?
Not yet. It's just for the fact that we're a federally regulated facility. And so I don't want to have to stop production in order to have a tour. And therefore, it turns into a bit of a logistics problem in order to just have people in. The level of licensing and compliance is just rigorous and high when it comes to the federal level of fun. In our downtown store, you can take a peek down here, but we don't make products. We make drinks down here.
Awesome. Well, Eva, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for carving time out of your Sunday morning to do so.
Happy to be here, Aiden. Thank you.